Okay, I think we're going to get started now. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our How to Apply to the UK and Ireland event. Unfortunately, we won't be talking about Ireland tonight, but I will be uploading slides on how to apply to Ireland as well. So we have Benjamin Pinker and Florence Darlington here to speak to us tonight.
Hi everyone, my name's Ben, and I'm going to just talk a little bit about the application process to the UK. So do you want to, yeah, okay, here we go. So basically just a brief introduction into what the foundation program is in the UK. So it's a 2-year program for training for training doctors. So it starts, so it's basically, it's a foundation program, so you'll do 6 jobs and they'll be 4 months long. You'll do 3 in F1 and 3 in F2, and you'll rotate in different jobs. So you'll do at least 1 surgical job, 1 medical job, and 1 community-based job. Community-based job will be something like psychiatry or a GP, like a general practice placement. So these are like, it's not specialty training, this is like general training. So you do this for 2 years. All students in the UK do this after medical school. And then after that, you go into specialty training. And that's, you don't need to focus on that too much at the moment, but just bear in mind that that comes along later. So next slide, please. So this is just an example of the kind of jobs you'll get. So for example, this is for the Peninsula Deanery, like down in the southwest of England. So you'll get 6 jobs. So the first 3 jobs, which will be in your F1, will be, for example, in like, so in this case, the first one is pediatrics at Barnstable Hospital. So you do pediatrics, general surgery, and then general medicine for each will be 4 months. And they'll be in Barnstable Hospital. And then for F2, you'll be in another hospital in Exeter. And you'll do a psychiatry job, acute internal medicine, and then general practice. So that will be in Exeter. So that's just sort of an example of how your F1 and F2 would be. Next slide, please. So how to start for the application. So this is kind of important part. So what's important to note about the application is that there's 2 sections. So there's the eligibility part, and there's the actual foundation program application. So what's important to understand is that the eligibility is only for IMG, so international medical graduates. And if you go on the website, so if you just Google UK Foundation Program, you'll find the website to the website to the program, and there they'll have like really clear guidelines that you can download. It's like a PDF copy. There's a picture on the slide here of what it looks like. It's about 30 pages or so, and it just explains really clearly all the steps you have to do, all the stuff that you need when you apply to the UK. So make sure you have a read of that before you apply. So that's the first step, eligibility. And then the second part is the foundation program application. And there's another PDF that explains all the steps for that. And the foundation program is what UK and IMG students take part in. So it's like kind of like a 2-step process, but the first part is eligibility, and that's what you've really got to make sure you get right. So next slide, please. So the important thing is the timeline. So they have quite a clear timeline of all the dates you want to look out for. They often have a lot of dates, but the dates you really want to look out for are the eligibility window. So these are the dates from last year, so when me and Flo applied. So the eligibility window opened on the 14th of July, and it closed on the 4th of August. So the 4th of August is like a really important date, because if you miss that date, you won't be able to apply for that cycle. So make sure you've got those dates in mind, and you want to have all your dean statement and all the different stuff that we'll go over in a minute done by then. So that's really important. And then the outcome comes out about a week later. And then once you got your outcome, there is like a small window where you can appeal it if it didn't come through. But this is doesn't work for everyone. But I know, for example, one person had to appeal theirs because they used there was a mistake with their exam, and they thought they failed their exam, their English exam. So it's kind of useful to know those dates as well, but hopefully that won't be a problem for most people. So just bear in mind, eligibility window opens in July and closes in early August. The outcome will be about a week later. And then remember that national application opens in September. And it's really important because once you've got your eligibility, you still have to go through the national application as well. So don't forget to do that. Next slide, please. So for the eligibility application, so this is, like I said, a pre-application process for non-UK medical students. It's quite simple. You just go on Oriel in sort of July, August when the window opens. You create an account on the Oriel website. You plug in all your details, and then you upload the documents that are relevant. There's not that many. There's just a few documents that I'll go over in a minute. Next slide, please. So the criteria summary. So this is quite important. So the stuff you really want to focus on is you want a proof of identification. This is pretty straightforward. So it'll be like a scanned copy of your passport. And then just like, so you want an up-to-date passport. And that's just where you plug in all your basic details. And then there's a dean statement. So this is, you ask the dean's office to fill this out. And this is where they put in all your medical school information. So that's the dean's office that looks after that. They usually know what they're doing. They were quite good with it last year. Just make sure they're aware that you're applying, and make sure you get on that early, because sometimes they can be a bit, inefficient. So you want to make sure they don't miss the deadline. And then the important thing is also the English language proficiency test. So you can either do the IELTS or the OET. And this is really important because they have quite strict criteria for the English language test, but I'll go over this in a minute. And then you also need visa evidence, or like evidence to show you have the right to work in the UK if you're a non-EU applicant. Right, next slide, please. So this is the Dean statement. So every year they upload the latest version. So make sure the Dean's office use the latest version when they do your application. This is the one from last year that we used. They know how to do it. Just make sure they do it and they know the dates. They don't, hand it in late. But that was pretty straightforward, this part. Next slide, please. So the difficult part about the eligibility is the English language exam. So basically, I read about the exact criteria online. So if your medical school conducts like less than 70% of its clinical hours in a language other than English, you need proof that you can, proof of language skills. So that's the case for PUMS. So you have to sit these language exams. The sort of minimum grade is quite high, so you need at least 7.5 if you want to pass. You need at least 7.5 in each domain to get through. Or you can sit the OET. I didn't do the OET, so I'm not as familiar with it. But in that one, you need at least 400. The reason why I did IELTS is it was all online, so you could do it at a testing center, and you write up your essays on a computer, and it's all done at one station on a computer, so it's a little bit easier, whereas the OET is handwritten. There are less dates for the OET. Also, the OET don't have an examination center in Poznan, so you have to go to Warsaw to sit it, whereas IELTS have an examination center in Poznan, so it's a little bit easier to do. The one thing I would really recommend with people who are sitting, trying to apply to the UK, is make sure you do these exams early, because they're not easy. Even though you think they are, they're really not. I struggled a lot with my IELTS scores. So make sure you start early. Like if you're applying this year, start now. Start looking at it, book it, and get on with it. All right, next slide, please. So the way it works is you just go on the IELTS website. So this is pretty straightforward. You go on the British Council of IELTS, just Google that. You'll find it comes up very, very easily. So pick the IELTS academic test. You can pick the other ones, but make sure you pick the IELTS academic. You can do it paper-based or computer-based. I always did it computer-based because the results come back quicker. And paper-based, you have to write by hand. I don't know, I'm faster on a computer. Maybe some people prefer doing it by paper. I always did it computer-based. I think it's easier. Be careful with availability, because when you book it, sometimes they might not have a spot for a few weeks or a month or two. So you got to be organized, because there's no options before the eligibility window closes. You're going to miss your chance to apply for the UK. The exam's quite pricey, so it's 815 Z's, which is it's quite a lot, especially if you have to sit in multiple times. Also, if you go for a remark, which is once you receive your results, you can contest the results and ask them to remark it, and that costs 407.5 Z's, so it's quite a lot as well. So if you have to do it multiple times, the price does rack up quite quickly. Next slide, please. So how it works is for IELTS, you can sit it at the testing center is located at the Collegium de Vici, so it's just by Sit Della Park. It's pretty easy to find. It's all explained once you book the test, but just know that it's there. And then, so that's for the reading, the writing, and the listening section. And then the spoken section is held at this testing facility. It's by Starbucks near Baltic. So they're at different locations. So just bear that in mind. Next slide, please. So my experience with the IELTS was pretty horrific, to be frank. I was quite organized with it, and I first sat it in November, so about like 7 to 8 months before the deadline. And I got my scores were fine in everything except for the writing. I got 7. That was my first attempt. I did a remark, still came back as a 7. So I was strong with that. And then next slide, please. And then I did it another 3 times. On the 4th attempt, I finally got a 7.5. But this was not easy. Okay, it was very, very difficult. They just kept giving me 7. They kept giving me 7. And as you can see on my 3rd attempt, I got 9, 9, 9, and 7. And it's out of 9. So, it was not easy. I really struggled to get the 7.5. And I know other people whose native language is English, and they've struggled to get a 7.5. So do not take it lightly. I know some people find it easy as well. Some people first attempt, they get it. So it doesn't happen to everyone, but for some people it is tricky. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are my tips for the IELTS. I became a little bit of an expert on it at one point because I had done it so much. So obviously prepare correctly. My main advice would be, because most people, their difficulty, like the reading, the listening and the spoken section are fine, then you probably won't have any difficulties with that. It's with the writing. So the writing is you've got to write an essay in about, I think it's an hour. So you've got to write one essay that's a descriptive essay, and then one essay that's where you argue a topic. The first part, which is a descriptive essay, is pretty straightforward. That's not too bad. But the second one, which is you've got to argue a topic, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes because the topics can cover anything. And if it's something you don't know anything about, it can be quite difficult to write about. So be prepared. So what I did is I went on this website. It's IELTS by Liz, and she has loads of topics. And then you can just practice them. So make sure you practice your timing, because timing is quite difficult. And then practice your structure, practice your introductions, your arguments, your conclusions, and just make sure you're ticking the boxes, because it's quite tricky. And if you go in without studying, a lot of people, you're unlikely to get the score a 7.5 if you don't at least practice a little bit. You can watch videos on YouTube. There's a few things out there that are quite handy. And I also read this document, the IELTS Made Easy. It's like a 70-page document that just goes through step by step what you need to work on, tips and tricks for the IELTS exam, and how to improve. But my big advice would be for the writing, just practice. Make sure you're not making silly spelling mistakes. Make sure you have a clear frame of mind in terms of the structure you use for your essays. And just make sure you're really systematic. So when you go into that exam, you know exactly how to write your essay and how you need to go about it. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the end, I hired a tutor because I was trying to do it by myself and I wasn't really getting anywhere. So in the end, I contacted this lady called Diana Henshaw, and she was lovely. She's based in New Zealand, and she was quite pricey, honestly, but it is what it is. And I would just email my essays to her, and she would mark them, and she would tell me where to improve. Because it wasn't, my problem was not grammar. It was not, obviously I can speak English. It was not grammar or spelling. It was really just structuring it in the way that IELTS want it. And that was where I was struggling. So I basically just sent a silly amount of essays to Diana Henshaw, and she corrected them and just made sure that I was sort of ticking the IELTS boxes. So if you're struggling, I definitely recommend that you contact her, because she really helped me get the score I needed. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is my last slide. Just like really important tips for the IELTS is just make sure you follow like this basic essay structure, which I know seems really simple and obvious, but you just got to make sure you do it. So, you start with introduction, where you sort of restate the essay topic, and then you briefly elaborate on the opinion you have for the essay topic, because basically they're going to give you a small sentence with a topic to discuss, and you have to argue either in favor or against it. And that's usually the style they go for. So you want to restate the essay topic, and then do a brief discussion of your opinion, and then you want to do 2 arguments. Usually do 2 for or 2 against, because it's just easier. If you do 1 for, 1 against, it makes your essay structure a little bit more complicated. So do 2 essays for, 2 arguments for, 2 arguments against, and then summarize your arguments, and then restate your opinion as like the final sentence. And be careful for your arguments. Always, for each argument, include 1 statement of your argument, one sentence that really elaborates on your arguments, and then provide a specific example of your argument. You want like sort of like 3-point structure for each argument, and it's very important, because otherwise you just don't tick the IELTS boxes, so to speak, and then and then you won't get your points. So really try and follow this structure, and you should be all right. Next slide.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the actual foundation program application. So just like Ben said, with the eligibility, you apply an Oriel, you do the same thing with the foundation program application. And here I have a screenshot of my Oriel account. As you can see, they have like a little timeline showing how far along you are in the application process, which is quite handy. And just like Ben said, it's really important to look out for the applicant handbook that has all of the important information regarding the upcoming cycle. And it'll also have all of the important dates that you need to be aware of. Ours was published at the end of July last year, so I'm guessing it will be similar this year, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. Okay, so the form is split up into 2 parts, parts 1 and 2. So I'm going to talk through the first part here. It has 8 different categories that you have to fill out, and they're all pretty self-explanatory. The first part is personal info. You agree to the terms and conditions. You put in your contact info, your passport information. You need to indicate whether you need any special arrangements because of any disabilities, and also whether or not you want to be considered for less than full-time training. The second part is eligibility. In terms of professional registration, you need to indicate whether or not you will graduate with full, partial, or no GMC registration. I'm not sure if it's different for the 6MD program, but with the 4MD program, you don't graduate with any GMC registration, so you need to indicate that. And then you also need to declare whether or not you have the right to work in the UK. So if you're a UK citizen, then you would just indicate that, and it shouldn't be a problem. In terms of fitness to practice, you would need to declare whether or not you have any criminal convictions or cautions. For references, you need to provide referee information and details. So this isn't actually for your foundation program application. It's actually going to be used by potential future employers. So you have the opportunity to change the referee information for a long time after you submit the application. I and a few other people use Dr. Ijitsky from oncology. You have to use someone who's associated with your university and who is a teacher. And he's a really good person to approach if you're looking for someone. In terms of competences, you need to give all the details regarding your MD degree. So you need to say which university you go to, what kind of medical degree you'll have, and which country you're studying in. Equality is just what it sounds like. Under monitoring, you need to indicate your gender, your ethnic background, your religious beliefs, and your marital status. The second part is just for applicants applying to Northern Ireland only, and you need to indicate whether or not you are Protestant, Catholic, or neither. Declarations are just what they sound like. You have to just tick a bunch of boxes to show that you agree with the declarations. And the last section is foundation priority programs. So these are programs that were developed specifically for areas of the UK that are struggling to attract trainees. And if you want more information on those, you can find them on the UK FPO website. So the second part of the form is a lot shorter. The first part of the form is regarding specialized foundation programs. So these are programs that put a heavy emphasis on research, teaching, and leadership and management skills. So if those are things that you're interested in, then you would indicate yes. I don't have any interest in it, so I indicated no. And then the second part of is supporting information. So under evidence, you would put whether or not you have any additional degrees, so a bachelor's or a master's, and you would upload your diploma here as well. And also you would provide information on any publications you've been a part of as well. And then in the final part of the supporting information, we have pre-allocation first. So pre-allocation is basically for applicants who have a specific need to be placed in a specific geographical location. For example, if you have a family or if you have children and you need to be in a specific deanery, you would apply for pre-allocation, which means that you would get a spot before everyone else does. Reasonable adjustments pertain to the SJT, which I'll speak about a bit later. You need to indicate whether or not you need any reasonable adjustments for the test in advance, if you need extra time or anything like that. And it's really important that you get this done during the application, because even at the time of booking your SJT, you can't apply for them then. Linked applications are for people who are married or in a relationship and they wish to be placed together. So this would be a good option if that applies to you, but just bear in mind linking your application to someone else's might weaken your chances of getting into the more competitive areas. And lastly, SJT sharing just refers to whether or not you want your SJT result to be shared with your university. And now on to preferences. So in case you weren't aware, the UK is split up into a number of different areas called deaneries, and there are 19 of them in total. And under preferences, you can rank the deaneries in order of your preferences. So there are a number of things that you might consider when trying to pick, for example, where you want to live, the cost of living in that area, whether or not you need to be close to friends or family. And also, like Ben described, if you look at the kind of programs that each deanery is offering, that might influence your choice as well. So as you can see, I put South Thames as my #1 spot because that's where I live currently. It's where I did my undergrad, so I'm very familiar with the area. And it's also the largest deanery, and you can find information online about the applicant to places ratio for each deanery, and the South Thames, there are very good ratios. It's about 1-to-1. So I figured I had a good chance of getting in, which is why I put it as my #1. The good thing about the preferences is even though the application is due, for us it was September 22nd, as you can see, you actually have up until February to change your preferences. And actually that was today for us. So up until midday today, we could have reordered our preferences. So don't worry if you don't have all of your preferences solidified by the time you submit your application. Okay, so like Ben said, you need to apply for the IELTS, and the second test that you need to do for the application is the SJT, or Situational Judgment Test. So this is a computer-based assessment which assesses your patient focus, commitment to professionalism, effective communication, coping with pressure, and team working. In terms of booking the exam, so like I say on the slides, these dates were for our cycle, but just look out for the dates for the upcoming cycle, but they should roughly be the same. So online booking opened on the 29th of September for people with approved reasonable adjustments. For everyone else, the window opened on October 4th and closed on October 2nd. So as you can see, there are only 3 days during which you can book your SJT, so it's really important that you get that done as soon as possible. In terms of taking the exam, there are 2 testing windows. You can either do the test in December or in January. Most people that I know did it in January. Really, there's no benefit to taking it in one window or the other. It's just down to your personal preference and what works with your schedule. The exam can be taken online proctoring. I think that was something new they introduced with COVID, or in person at a Pearson View Centre. Everyone I know took it online. I took it online, so did Ben. I took it online while I was here in Poznan, and I honestly would not recommend it. I ran into loads of issues throughout the exam. The system crashed multiple times. I had to restart my laptop, and it was a whole mess. I know other people that couldn't even finish their exam on time. Other people had to start a couple of hours late. Like, it was a whole mess. So I would really recommend taking the exam in person to avoid all of that if you can. So the test presents you with a number of workplace situations and asks how you would best respond to them. There are 3 different question types, and these include multiple choice questions, so picking the best 3 options out of 8, or ranking questions where you would pick, where you'd rank responses from the most to the least appropriate way to respond to any given scenario. The exam has 70 questions, which are split over 2 different parts. 10 of these questions are actually experimental questions, and they aren't considered as part of your score, but of course you don't know which questions those are, so you should do your best with each one. You have 2 hours and 20 minutes to finish the test, and even though there are 70 questions, your mark will be curved out of 50. In terms of preparing for the SJT, I just have a couple of tips. The first one is to set aside enough time to prepare. I studied for it for like over about a month or so, and I would say that was a good amount of time. Make sure you don't procrastinate. Generally, people say to stick to a minimal number of resources, and I would agree with that. I would say stick to 1 or 2 because too many can cloud your judgment. I used this book, the Oxford Situational Judgment Test book. I found it to be really helpful. And I also did the practice papers that are on the UK FPO website, which were also really helpful. Okay, so that's all about the actual application. And now I'm going to talk about the Educational Performance Measure, or the EPM. So the EPM is a measure of your non-clinical and clinical skills and performance up until the point of your application. So how is it calculated? The first part is the EPM decile score, and this is allocated based on how well you perform during medical school. So I don't know how it works with the 6MD program, but with the 4MD program, your ranking from 1st and 2nd year are taken into consideration. And so if you're in the top 10% of the year, you would be in the 1st decile. If you're in the top 20%, you'd be in the 2nd decile, and so on and so on. The least number of points you can get is 34 if you're in the 10th decile, so the worst. And if you're in the 1st decile, you would get 43 points out of 50. And then for educational achievements, there are a maximum of 7 points that you can get for this. 5 points are allocated for additional degrees that you might have, so a bachelor's or a master's, and there are a different number of points that are given for how well you've done, for example, getting a first, a 2-1, 2-2, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 points are given for publications that you might have. Both of these together would give you an EPM score out of 50, and this, along with your SJT score, would give a score out of 100, which gives your allocation score, which I'll describe more later on. Yeah, so like I just said, the allocation score is the sum of your EPM score and your SJT result, and it's out of 100. And these scores are used to basically allocate you to whichever deanery that you're going to get into. And there are websites that give you information on like the average allocation score and minimum allocation score that each deanery accepted in any given year. So here, for an example, I have the East Anglia Foundation School. I think this data is from 2020. So as you can see, the lowest allocation scores they admitted were around 73. And this is really helpful because it kind of gives you an idea of where you might be more likely to get in. In terms of the EPM score, you can calculate it yourself because, like I said, it's based on your med school ranking and your educational achievements, so you can calculate it yourself. And in terms of the SJT result, the average score is 39 out of 50, so you could use that. And yeah, so with that, you can kind of gauge whether or not you think you're likely to get into a particular foundation school or not, and it might be helpful during the application process when you're picking your preferences. And that's everything that we have. Yeah, thank you for listening, and we'd be happy to take any questions.